Hey everyone, welcome to Tech Tip Talk. I'm Sarah Walworth.
I'm Christina McGrath, and we are Knitting Tech Editors.
Hey, here on Tech Tip Talk, we answer your questions about tech editing and knitting design and knitting pattern writing. We invite you now to throw your questions and comments into the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them.
So hey everybody, today we're talking with Tif Neilan of Tif Hand Knits. The knitwear designer and teacher, has been designing full-time since 2019. She designs all kinds of things, but we're always hearing about her awesome sweaters, and they're just stunning. She brings a really unique perspective coming from an interior design background, so she has her focus on appropriate distribution of color, pattern, texture, and balance, and we want to chat about her process. So really excited to have her here. So bring her in, Sarah.
All right, let's see if I can do this correctly. Here we go. And Tif.
Hi. Thank you for having me today.
Welcome to the show.
We're so excited to have you. Thank you for coming.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm excited.
And we're super excited to have you here. It is exciting to talk to you in person. We've both been following you a long time on Instagram and other places.
Oh, yeah. A few years ago, I saw you at Rhinebeck. I was with somebody walking around who was like, couldn't talk, so he's super fan of yours, and like so excited to see you. So it was really fun.
Oh, we got to work on a book project together, which was a lot of fun too. That was amazing. So we're going to jump straight into questions. Tif, are you ready?
Okay. Yeah, I'm ready.
Christina?
Okay. We always like to start. Can't find the thing, but that's okay.
Can't find the question.
Can't find it. How did you get started working in the knitting industry, Tif?
So, it was kind of an accident, really. Pretty early into my knitting, I realized that I couldn't, for the life of me, follow a pattern the way it was written. So, like very early on, I would look at a pattern and I would say, okay, I like this and this about it, but like I have long arms and I want there to be stripes here and I want there to be this here. And so before I knew it, I would kind of like rewrite a pattern for myself. And I'm self-taught. I learned how to knit like watching YouTube videos, basically. And I think that when you self-teach yourself and you're not like part of like a knitting community or knitting group, like there's no one there to tell you that in your first year of knitting you don't like write your own pattern, you don't redesign your own pattern. So I just kind of like I started doing it, and obviously it was completely about me and my proportions and what I wanted. And so there wasn't like grading involved for all the sizes, but someone said to me, she was like, it's not typical that that's how you jump into knitting. Have you ever considered like putting your designs out there? And at the time, I was working in interior design, and which is all I thought I ever wanted to do for my whole life since I was like 7 years old. And so the seed was sort of planted, and I thought like, I don't know, maybe. And it was kind of like, I think it was kind of inspired by my kids who at the time were willing to let me knit for them, and knitting in a smaller size for kids. My first pattern that I actually wrote, I like first knit for my daughter's American Girl doll. And at that size, it's like so quick and easy, and you're like, oh, this is amazing. But pretty early on, I realized that there were, Ravelry has like thousands and thousands of patterns, but I wasn't finding like exactly what I felt like knitting at that moment. Right. And so I thought, I'm going to spend the time creating it for myself. Like, let me look into what it entails to write this for multiple sizes. And so my first book that kind of, in terms of like grading and whatnot, was the Vogue knitting book, the older, like the real thick one.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
And, you know, and it was kind of like a ton of Google searching on how to do body proportions, like how to grade it. And I will be the first to admit that, like, I was looking back at one of your conversations about, like, you know, grading for the size range and it not being about a proportion. And that's absolutely how I learned it first, was like a proportion.
Right.
And so I do remember, like, in my first test knit, one of my designs, someone saying to me, like, you know, the neck for this size is like way too big. But you follow, you know, especially when you're starting out, like, you follow kind of the information that's been provided. And I think it took some time to realize that part of it was that the information that was put out there was kind of based off of a pretty limited size range.
And that's why proportions work for
Right?
small,
So
for the middle of the size range, right?
Right. So like the proportion idea, I think in theory was working based off of the size range that was assumed you were designing for.
Right.
And so there's older patterns that I think I've like even kind of paused them on Ravelry right now, like that I want to go back and really relook at them, because I think, you know, I followed the information that I had at the time, and it's through trial and error and wonderful tester feedback that it's kind of like, oh, that doesn't work at this end of the spectrum or this end of the spectrum, like in both directions.
Well, and I think the kind of fit that we want is better now. Like,
yeah,
I think we
right?
want better fitting things.
Yes. That's a great point. I did have an older woman wrote to me. She emailed me one day and she said, I'm so amazed when I look at like patterns now, because I look at the patterns that I knit for my children 30 years ago. And she's like, you know, and they were basically like boxes with like sleeves. And it's funny because, you know, I think you do, when you look back at like the way that that the fit has changed over the years. It's obviously every year, you know, people are kind of bringing up new valid points about how we can like fine tune the fit so that we're not wearing boxes with sleeves, and that a design will look appropriate, you know, through the entire size range, not that like it fits the middle 2 or 3 sizes and then the smallest sizes and the largest sizes look different from that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, and like sweaters, hand knit sweaters can be, you know, have a more tailored look now. Like if you were sewing something, you know,
right?
Like those same kind of standards, and like you said, for all sizes, there's ways instead of just that limited group.
Right.
And I think it's cool that we're growing. You're not just growing as a designer, but we're also growing as an industry. We're starting to say, hey, maybe we want to do things a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. I mean, you know, I remember also very early on, someone had asked me a question about like how I was determining the amount of ease that I wanted in a sweater. And I thought, like, well, I think I'm designing it first for myself. And I'm saying, okay, I want it to have this amount of ease because I want it to fall on my body this particular way. And then trying to, you know, be very conscious of looking at the entire size range and then saying, okay, so if you're seeing it on me and you're seeing it with this amount of ease and this is how it looks on my body, right? So for each size, from the smallest to the largest size, ideally we want that same amount of ease, that same amount of drape.
Right.
And if someone would prefer it to be more fitted or have a greater amount of ease, then they can pick a size that gives them that. But
yes.
like, right?
Right.
And so I think, right, like rather than us trying to make an assumption that
right.
someone would want more or less, like if this is the size. And so with my patterns, so I do say like, this is the finished chest or bust size and then select a size. So if let's say if I'm saying 4 to 6 inches, you know, like select a size that is 4 to 6 inches larger than your actual chest size. And if you decide that you want it to be completely fitted, then you pick a different size, but at least that guidance is there. Rather than, and I mean, if people would still like to label it as extra small through 5X, that's fine. But I think for me, it's rather than me assigning the size to it. It's like, this is the finished garment size. Right. And then you decide, do you want the suggested ease or do you want, you know, more or less? And I think we're just more aware of that now. Maybe.
So you're putting the agency within the knitter's hands instead of dictating how things are going to be. And that's super empowering.
Well, but you have to, because you can only make this is the design. This is how it's intended to look and fit. And that's what you're portraying to the knitters, right? And that to the community. You're saying, this is what this will look like if you follow these instructions. That's your promise. That's what you have to do. You can't say, I can also promise you this fit and this fit and this fit. Like, this is what I can promise you. And so your pattern's going to deliver that. And then, if they want something different, you know, that's on them.
Right.
You know?
That's exciting. So we're talking about the industry. Okay, Christina, you reorganize the questions. Which one should I do next? Christina, hit the next one.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so Sarah wants to go to this one. What are you loving about our industry right now? What do you love about our industry?
So I was thinking about that when you'd sent the questions over, and I thought, I mean, there's really so many things that I love. I think that I'm constantly seeing such a large variety of styles of pattern. You know, whether it's like the lace patterns and color work patterns, and I'm super into stripes right now. Like, I think that we're definitely not at a shortage of like designs, a variety of designs being put out there. Right. But a thing that I'm finding more recently is that I think people are being a little bit more like upfront, I think, about the design process. So it's not, I feel like it kind of felt like it was like a secret before. And so like I own like 1,000 books and I purchased so many patterns, but it's kind of like, okay, like I really like that person's design and I love, and it's not about like stealing the design, but it's how can I improve? I want to improve the fit, and I feel like people weren't talking about it. So it felt like the secret that you had to like somehow break the code. And like, how do you know what I mean? Like, we're not just born knowing how to design every single pattern. And so it's like, okay, that was awesome. Like, how did you do that? And I don't want to steal your idea, but I would love to know, how did you perfect that fit of this shape and whatnot? And I think I see people kind of putting that information out there a lot more often. And also I think there's a lot more size charts that are out now. I was recently mentioning to a tech editor, like, so I only know from my size perspective, but I said, the one thing that I've been struggling with this entire time is upper arm circumference in relation to a chest, because I even look at mine and it says like, so my bust is 36 inches. And like some of the charts say that my upper arm circumference should be like 11 inches, but it's not, it's 12 and a half. So like, I already know that from myself.
Yes.
And so it's so hard when you're trying to design for a large size range and assign that number. Like, I'm working off of whoever's size chart, but like, I don't actually know if this upper arm circumference is correct for any of the sizes. And so it's been a lot of trial and error.
I just want to reassure you about that particular measurement.
Yeah.
And that's where it's so awesome that you have testers that you can rely on their feedback, because this is a particularly difficult measurement to figure out, to broaden and make for a size. Like when Sarah and I were building our chart for the book, we were really unsure, like, so we tried to give guidance on how to manage that issue, but it's a really difficult measurement. Like you're finding, everybody is so different in what that measurement is. The arm is crazy, man. That arm.
And like, why don't more people talk about that?
Because that's a really good point. Like, why are we holding all this close to our chest, you know?
Yes.
Well, I think part of it is we wonder if it's our own, if we wonder if we're in our own bubble. I think we kind of were like, oh, maybe I'm the only person. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I just have the problem. And I think that's what I love about this industry is we can be more, I think we need to be more upfront. Like, hey, the size charts are wrong. All the upper arms are too small. And, and let's make some changes. Let's so that designers can have better material to work from.
Sometimes upper arms are too big. Like it is the most not correct measurement, I think, that people have the most trouble getting right.
Yeah.
And that's like, I will be the first to admit that is like my biggest struggle. And so I feel like initially I would get feedback like, you know, I had to add extra stitches because the arm was too snug. And then I increased it. And then I got a lot of feedback about the arm circumference being too large. And so it's still like this work in progress. I feel like I tweak it slightly with every design, and I'm just like waiting to know that I've like hit the mark in relation to the chest measurement.
Right.
But I have started, like, I always pick up extra stitches when I'm like in the corners between the held stitches and the cast on. And so I've started adding notes to my patterns about like, if you decide that you'd like to keep those 2 extra stitches, if you want the extra ease.
That's smart.
But it's a little tricky about like, if it's too much to begin with, I mean, you can decrease right away, but you'll still have that initial,
have that bigger upper part over in the cap area. Yeah.
Right. So that is something that, I mean, it's like the bane of my existence. I'm trying really hard to kind of, because I think, you know, that another thing I feel like is that there's a lot of like assumption that if a design doesn't hit the mark in all of the different measurements, that it's like carelessness on the part of the designer, that like they've decided that they don't, you know, like a disregard for the right fit for certain sizes. But it's, at least for me personally, it's that like I'm just literally working with the information that I have.
Right. And
so, you know, my sincere apologies if that is wrong. And I kind of like, I don't know until I get the feedback. And then, so my sizing chart has changed 10 times, and it's kind of this compilation of many different charts and then tester feedback at this point. But,
do you have your own size chart now?
I do.
You do? That's fantastic. And that's what we encourage designers to do. Like, hone it, make it yours, instead of just going with a standard. Like then it meets your market's needs too.
Well, and having transparency about what knitters can do to get this measurement, and saying that it's a difficult thing, having that option for them about those stitches is a great solution. And that's another time when it's so good to share your schematic and measurement information before they buy it, so they can see like what the measurements are, and you can say in that place,
right, and
to
actually
change the arm measurement, do this, you know.
That's a good point that you bring up, and I also wanted to address a comment that's on the side. But so I actually have not been sharing the schematic like ahead of time. I mean, I will list the measurements, and it's one of those things, and not a cop-out answer, but I literally didn't think about it. I didn't think about the fact of like how important and so I'm trying to figure out a way, whether it's that I mean, for my recent test knit post, I kind of just like printed out my schematic and I took a picture of it just so that it was able to be available for the, because ultimately it's, you know, not having had it presented was not like a way of trying to like, you know, like sneakily get you to purchase my pattern. And then it's just, I just didn't think about it. Right. And I don't feel like I see that very often, that like the schematic is provided. So it was literally just hadn't occurred to me.
But it's for the same reason that you were saying before.
Yeah.
The whole industry of like knitwear designs it's all based on the full bust, and that's all that gets shared. Like that's
right.
The standard. That's, like you said, what the information is that's out there. That's what you think, like you're doing what you think is
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I have at least been like, and I want to go back to other patterns and add more measurements in. So at least, even if the schematic, if they can't visually see it, there's a larger picture of all of the measurements and helping to determine that. But I'm also not opposed at all if someone were to email me and say, I'd really like to see the schematic. I mean, I would absolutely send it to them. It's just kind of like figuring out the right way to get it onto Ravelry kind of thing.
Well, like you said, even a couple key measurements, adding them to your is great.
Or as a picture on the sales page, you can do that too.
Yeah. So, and then I did see like, so the comment about here about, Allison wrote about fashion trends also changed. In the 80s, we were wearing large sleeves, deep armholes. And then the 2000s sleeves got much slimmer. So it's funny because, and then the comment above it about there being the excess of the armpits.
Right.
When I was in designing circular yoke sweaters, I was following a guideline that had, you know, a certain percentage of stitches roughly to go to the armpit. And there wasn't much like explanation as to why. It was kind of like presented as, you know, like you've finished working your increase rounds and you have X number of stitches, but you need this number. So you make it up in the armpit, right? That's filling in the gap. And semi-recently, a test knitter said to me, she said, you know, I'm not sure how to tweak this because I have too much fabric like in between like the side of the bust and the arm. And she said, I do have narrow arms. So like my bust measurement and my arm measurement don't really fall in line with your chart. And she said, that's typical for me for patterns, but I'm just curious about it. And so I was chatting with a friend and I said, like, I'm trying to figure out what's the issue here? Is it like, is the yoke too deep or are there not enough stitches in the armpit? And I like it for 2 days. I was like doing all sorts of different research and trying to figure it out. And I finally kind of circled back to, so like the initial guide that I had been following was really based off of the yoke being like swan show depth, where you hardly needed any stitches in the armpit because of where it was falling, right? And as we've shortened the yoke for it to be more fitted, that measurement needed to increase. And so then I found a new thing about what percentage, based off of how we're designing them now, like what percentage should go into the armpit. And I redid all the numbers and I sent it out, and, you know, and immediately, like one of my friends who was test knitting for me was like, she followed the revise and she's like, the fit is perfect.
Yeah.
It was one of those like, oh my God, like so excited. But it's one of those things like you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And then it's this like eye-opening, like I didn't realize how out of date that information was based off of how we've changed the way we design these patterns or the way we want them to fit.
Right.
Kind of thing. You know, like kind of that light bulb moment of the correlation between the depth and like how many stitches needed to be in the armpit once you've shortened it and it needs to be more fitted.
It's a crazy, that area of the body is hard to fit on, and it's hard to do it as a design and then make it work for everybody.
Well, so, it's the least difficult. It's the most difficult, I think, for the knitter to modify on their own.
Yeah, they
You
can't
know, this
modify.
part, like, you
Mhm.
gotta be able to follow the pattern for most people, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah.
what did you go with? So I always think it's like 8% of the full chest measurement should be at the underarm. Did you find a percentage or an
So
inch
I
measurement?
so I did so I initially found 8% across the board, and then in a different search I found that it suggested that it should really be between like 6% on the smaller sizes up to 8% on the larger size range,
Cool. Yeah.
mainly because and of course, I mean, so it's still a gamble because your assumption is like a certain proportion between your bust and your upper arm, which, and the upper arm, since we still since that's still a gray area, but it was suggesting that a slightly smaller percent on the smaller size range, because you don't want the armpit stitches to end up coming out.
End up coming into
Coming
the
out.
body, right?
Yes. And so that currently is the way I have my grading chart revised to. And I have so 2 patterns in testing right now based off of that new revised, and we're gonna see, I'm gonna see the feedback on that.
It's so
But I
exciting.
think, I mean, that's gonna be a kind of thing that like is being tweaked based off of
I love
course it won't be, it won't be the answer for literally every single person, and nothing ever will. But if it gets us closer to like, okay, this is, across the board where we want to be, or at least the starting point,
Yeah.
I think that's really helpful.
It's so exciting.
It's fascinating to me to listen to your learning process of what to figure out what works for you in the designing, but also what fits the circumstances of your design, meeting the knitter and meeting the maker where they're at, and realize, oh, this doesn't work. Okay, let's change it.
Yeah.
Let's fix this. Let's find what works, and doing a deep dive.
Yeah, no, I love you sharing about the struggles of being a knitting designer with this information that is available, and how to make it work for real people, and having that sounds like you really get wonderful feedback, which is so great, and like how important it's like this whole so exciting. So exciting.
It is, and I mean, it's really exciting, and I'm like, it's one of those things where I'm so appreciative when I get the new information. And at the same time, I'm also like, oh man.
You're looking at your catalog?
I'm also like, I need to like map out a month to like go back and look at some of these other patterns, because now I know this information, and I can't just know it and not do anything with it. So it's like, now it's like sitting there like taunting me kind of thing. But I also think like I never want us to feel like we can't be open to learning the new things, and admitting that like I didn't know everything that I needed to know the first time I designed a sweater, right? Like, and every day we're learning new things, and it's circling back to what I love about the industry. It's wonderful for designers to say like, I found this new method works better, or I really think we need to be conscious of ...
Right.
For it to open other people's eyes and say, okay, you're right. Like, maybe the standard has never really addressed those things, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be addressed. And, we moving forward, I think as we learn new information, like, not to feel, I mean, I do, part of me, I do feel like, oh gosh, I really want to like relook at some of these things and see, like, I won't say where I dropped the ball because I didn't know the information and disregard it, but like what I didn't know that now that I know it, like, how can I like, what can I do to improve whatever with this new information that I have? And kind of a commitment to like moving forward, those things being, that's important. And I don't want it to ever feel like I only care about like the perfect fit for these 3 sizes, and then the rest of them are, you know what I mean? Like, so
That's exciting.
I mean, I think like we're learning new things every day, and that's wonderful.
And
That's
like you have to. Oh, sorry, Sarah. Go ahead.
No, I think it's just amazing because it's part of growing as an entrepreneur and growing as a designer creatively is to be willing to make changes as you go. And it brings a fullness and a professionalism to your whole business.
Well, and I think you can't get mired down. I mean, it's just my personal opinion in life generally. I mean, you can't get mired down in what went wrong before. Like, you can only move forward and do it differently now. You know, like, there's just so much you can like redo. I mean, you know, and so maybe the key would be like, you know, you just have to move forward, like you said. You know.
So let me jump in since we're talking about design process and redoing designs. You do create beautiful garments. What is your process like? Would you share that with us?
Yeah. So I would say that the process, it's like there isn't a process. And I think the way a design evolves for me now is also very different than the way it evolved for me a couple years ago. Often for me, like, it's either okay, it's going to sound crazy. I often dream up designs, or they kind of like randomly fall into my head when I'm driving, like when I'm driving to the barn or driving home. And it's funny because I say that like, I know it sounds crazy, but it's one of those things where I feel like when I'm not trying to design something is when a design will come to me.
The muse shows up.
And sometimes it's that like I purchased yarn that I really loved and I didn't know what I was going to do with it, and it sits on my desk, or it sits, you know, on my book somewhere where I can see it for 3 months, for a year, for 2 years, and then all of a sudden one day I'm like, oh, I know what I want to do with that thing. And then hopefully I don't already have 4 whips going, because as soon as the idea is in my head, I'm like, I have to
do it right now.
Yes.
Sorry, whips. Something else came in the room that's more beautiful.
Yeah. It's like really hard. But I've found that I have found that like when I'm not given criteria to meet, like when someone doesn't ask me, okay, I would like you to use this yarn and create something like this, like the design, when it develops more organically, I enjoy the process that much more. And I feel like the end results, just when I look at like pattern sales, like the designs that just kind of were like an impromptu, oh my gosh, this came into my head and I started it and I love it and I'm so excited the whole time I'm knitting it. I don't know what's different about the like what I put out at time of like pattern release or the photos, but those patterns do so much better than the ones that were kind of like
fit it into a box.
Say forced, but like there was whether there was a parameter that I needed to stay within, or like a design that I commit to that like I should have said, I'm not feeling this, or I don't love it the way I thought I would, like, let me just start over. And maybe it's also the difference in like now being able to frog things without regret, which I think really hard before. Yeah. Of saying like, I know I've spent X number of time on this, but like, it's just not what I want it to be. Let me start over. I've never regretted it. So I don't know why sometimes it like takes a long time to get to that point. But
it is hard. I finally realized that like the torture it's causing me by sitting in the corner not being done is like, it's not worth it. Just rip it out, move on.
That is absolutely right. And it's funny, like I think now also the way I design, I've sort of stopped, and this doesn't mean that like of course I want my designs to resonate with people, but I've stopped trying to design based off of what I think the market wants.
Oh, I love it.
I now like, it's about like, what's missing from my wardrobe? What thing do I just want to be able to grab for all the time when I want something, like, and you hope, of course, you hope that that thing that you want will also resonate with the market. But I feel like the compromise of trying to design for the market rather than yourself kind of leads to disappointment in my experience. Um, and whether it's that like your genuine self doesn't come through enough because like it's clear that you're kind of trying to, you know, give the knitters what they want, but like they don't see you in it, or I'm not quite sure what the difference is once the design is out there. But for me, just for enjoying this as my job, and that I spend like a million hours every week working on, I think to have that, to continue that joy, you have to do it for yourself first.
Well, I think when you're in love with it, it's always going to be better.
I was just going to say
And
that.
people are going to want that.
Mm-hmm.
When the genesis of a design is a love affair, then people feel it's magic.
Right. And yes, and I also think that like, well, so I'm gonna bring up one of your questions because it kind of ties into this. You had asked about like, how have I made my work sustainable for me?
She asked her own question.
I love her.
That's
That's the first time that's ever happened to us. That's awesome.
But that's the thing, is I realized this like in January when I took a couple weeks off to kind of like do a massive purge and declutter in my house because I was feeling really burnt out. And I thought, when I saw that question come through, I kind of laughed. I was like, that's such a loaded question because I haven't figured out how to make this work sustainable for me. And I think that part of that is like this feeling of trying to stay relevant and like get things out as fast as possible. And then part of that comes this like that nervousness of having spent 2 weeks working on a design that you're not in love with, and saying like, can I afford to lose can I afford to lose that time? Do I finish it? Do I spend that 3 days finishing it?
Wow.
Or do I start over? And I think I finally came to that conclusion that it's like, I have to just start. I can't, like, because I feel like I work so hard, and I feel like I don't want any time to feel like it was lost. But at the end of the day, the disappointment that like the kind of like that end part of it, if your like heart isn't in it, then the rest of the process takes that much longer.
It's brutal.
Like, yeah, like getting myself to finish like the final edits of it and grading it. Like you know what I mean? Like you're not excited. It's not the same excitement. So it's not the same drive to like get it to the finish line. So at the end of the day, it's like, it's worth it to have lost those 2 weeks. So like,
you want to do your best work. Like that's, I think, what we're all about.
Right.
Like, you want to do your best work. And sometimes part of that's going to be scrapping something that's not working.
Right.
You know?
And it's not even necessarily that it's like the design is flawed in any way. It's that like, if I just don't love it, it's too hard for me to get through the rest, like the finishing,
the marketing and the finishing, and the pattern writing and the grading, all the things that don't have to do with design.
Yeah.
Right. That are all the back end stuff.
You got to care about it to sell it.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. That's awesome. So we talked a lot about already with the hurdles that have come up in designing. What are you actually excited about now? Someone in the comments just mentioned herringbone stitch.
Yeah.
That is definitely your love.
I love it. And I haven't been designing with it quite as much because I do know that it can be really taxing on like your wrists and your thumb joint. And so I've learned how to knit it with like a very relaxed tension. So I can knit it all the time, but I also appreciate that like, I don't want all of my designs to always include it. And then that be, for someone who doesn't enjoy it, this like hurdle that they're like, I either have to learn to love it or figure out something else to do there, but so mostly what I'm excited about is really kind of redefining what I want out of knitwear for myself, for my wardrobe. And I'm kind of like, I've been playing around with this idea more of building collections, which I've wanted to do for a couple years now. And as for what that will look like exactly, I'm not sure, but I just think that there's so many elements that, like, I might put 3 different elements that I really like into a sweater design. And then I think to myself, oh my gosh, I would love this in a shawl or a cowl or something else. And I don't do that nearly as often as I actually want to. And so that's kind of like playing into the trying to get back to like what will make me happy as
What's
a designer.
sustainable? Yeah.
Yeah, is like, I don't know, I kind of want to see where that goes, because I also think, and I did this with like, I mean, it happened with the book, with the designs that I did for the worsted book, where the strata hat that was included in the book really, I mean, as soon as I finished it, I was like, this has to be a sweater. It has to be. And it's one of my favorite knits. I mean, I loved every single second of it. And so I feel like I often feel that way, but I also think like it's kind of an opportunity, even in the reverse, like a hat is such a great opportunity for people to get comfortable with the techniques, like before doing a garment. Or it's even, I mean, it's like the perfect size for like a large gauge swatch for color work kind of thing. So, so that's something I think I want to explore a little bit more. And I'm really personally excited about tank tops.
Yes.
I have the one here, the one that I said that wasn't going to become a pattern, that will probably become a pattern. And then I cast on another one over the weekend in a different yarn weight. So this is, it only has one sleeve edge on it, but
love it. Look at those
it
stripes.
was one of those, like, I just wanted to knit it for myself, so I did. So I've been trying to not do knitting work in the evening or the weekends, so like outside of work hours. But because I enjoy knitting to relax, I decided, well, if I give myself like just for me knits, then that's not working, so it doesn't count. So that's my loophole. So yeah, so this was my first just for me loophole knit that I love.
Love it.
That I did actually already start. I have like, it's mostly graded for everybody.
That is a versatile garment, because
But
that can be a tank top in the spring and summer, and
yeah,
then turn into a vest, start layering it.
yeah. And I started another one over the weekend that's fingering weight, that actually is part of a collection piece with a shawl that that I will post for test knitting this week. And it was exactly that. It was one of those things that I was thinking, like, if there's yarn left over from this shawl, I really think I need to do a tank/vest. And there was. And I contemplated fighting it, and then I decided I couldn't.
I love how you listen to your muses, how you're just like, no, I don't want to fight that. I just need to do it. It's just so beautiful. It's inspiring.
Yeah, because I love, like, even just because you're a designer doesn't mean that every single thing you knit you have to grade out for the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it's, some things can be just for you. It's really smart to separate like my knitting for my life and myself and my knitting for work. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it also, like, I mean, even though I have now graded this pattern, while I was knitting it, I had only written it for myself. There was no, like, there wasn't an expectation of it needing to become a design. So the process was enjoyable. And then I finished it and was kind of like, all right, I think I might. But like, but the knitting process got to be like just pure joy, right? And that's what I needed.
And that's probably why you became a designer in the first place, right? There's so much joy in creating these things.
There really is. And it's funny because people ask me all the time, like, do you miss interior design? And I do. I really do miss it. I mostly just like drive my husband nuts by redoing things in my own house.
I love that.
And he's like, I won't question it. It's fine. But I do feel like it's the same process for me. And so then it also like fulfills the same, that like creative drive that I have of like, and then seeing the finished product. Like it's the whole process. It's the design process, and then it's making something with my own hands, which I'm still amazed about. Like even though I'm a knitter, it's still like, okay, I have like these balls of yarn and now I have this finished thing that I love. Like I still can't stop being amazed by how much joy that brings me. And so it's like, it just kind of like hits the same notes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's
That's
amazing awesome what sticks and string can do to the soul and how beautiful it can make things.
Absolutely.
Well, and it's great like finding a way to like scratch that same itch of interior design, you know, and make something so beautiful. Like your work is so nice.
Oh, thank you.
Well, so, like, thank you. Oh. Hold on just a second. I wanted to say thanks to everyone who's hung through this whole program. Thank you for being here. If you guys have a question for Tif, throw it in the comments because we'll be wrapping up our questions here in a minute and love to get yours answered.
Well, I want to ask this one, so I don't want to run out of time.
All right, go.
What advice would you give to a designer just starting out?
I love this.
So, so first, I think the thing that it took me several years to realize, which is that you can't design for what you think the market wants. You have to design for yourself first. And whether it's to fill a void in your own wardrobe or just whatever it is that's speaking to you, like I think that has to be the thing that drives you first, because it's aside from the fact that you need to enjoy the whole process, it's too hard to even anticipate what the market wants. You know, you think that like, because it shifts, right? It shifts all of a sudden and you're like, I thought we were still obsessed with blah, blah, blah. And we've all moved on to this. So like, you have to do it for yourself first.
Yeah.
And I think it's about not being scared to reach out to designers and ask them for advice on the process. I never did that. I never, ever reached out to someone. I just thought like, no, I can't, like, that would be not rude, but that would be like, that it would feel awkward for me to say to someone, like, can you not tell me your secrets, but like, what would you do in this scenario? And like, it felt like a cheat, right? Like that we were supposed to kind of like tough it and just figure it out on our own. Like that's how you're supposed to do it. That's how I felt that it needed to be. And I'm thankful, you know, like one of my really great friends who's also a knitwear designer, like we chat all the time and we will bounce ideas off of each other or say like, I ran into this issue. Do you think it's because of this? Like that openness to be able to talk to someone who's also going through it, who's in it. I think our assumption is that someone won't want to answer you. And that's not the case at all. I mean, I feel like, at least from my perspective, the only way that we improve garment design for everybody is if we're willing to have those conversations with people. And if someone is starting out and they're like, I really want to do this well, what can you tell me? You know, like it's in nobody's best interest for me to be like, nope, I'm not, you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of stuff that we learn the hard way that we don't need to learn the hard way if we felt more comfortable asking.
I want to say like 1,000%. Like what Ellen just said in the comments, that's good life advice.
Yeah.
Like we cannot get through life by ourselves. We need community. We need each other. And that's the only way to get better at what we do and help other people get better too. So
Absolutely.
A rising tide lifts all boats, says one of my
It's-
colleagues, Etienne Connaughton, and that's her tagline, and I just feel like we need to keep saying that. It's okay to talk to each other.
Well, because it's the truth.
Right.
I mean, it's not a gimmick. Like,
Mm.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I mean, I think unfortunately, like, it all feels like this huge competition,
Yeah.
Oh,
right? That you feel like, and maybe it's about like finding your people. Like, maybe every single designer you ask won't be open to sharing information, but it's about finding people who you click with, who you build like a good relationship with, that you feel like, and it goes both ways, that you can feel comfortable having that exchange and talking through things. And it's not about, like, it's not about not wanting to share information because you're scared that that person is now going to like create better designs. It's like, how can we as a whole make it so that everybody is like taking steps forward?
everybody
Right?
wins. Yeah.
Everybody's winning.
It's a win, 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 win.
Yeah, it is.
I love this. Thank you for sharing that. It's very, very powerful. So the question that we ask every guest, and are we keeping a tally on what
Are
it is?
you keeping a tally?
No.
I mean, I could go back and look at no. Maybe we should start though, because you ask me that all the time.
I actually, I
What?
knew, because I knew that you were going to ask that question, and I'm so excited about. Okay, so my current favorite thing are the knitting barber cords.
Oh,
See, that
So I haven't put on the second sleeve.
You're a one sleever right now, aren't you?
Just Sleeve Island all over the place.
Sleeve Island at Tif's house this week.
It's so hard for me to do the second sleeve that, yes.
I'm just dying that you've got three sleeves.
I currently have 3 patterns right now that have 1 sleeve.
There is a technique to do 2 at a time,
I've considered 2 at a time sleeve knitting and brioche as the things that I'm tackling for 2024.
Yes.
And it's funny because actually, as I'm knitting the sleeve of my Brooklyn tweed sweater and it's worsted, and it's going like really fast, I'm thinking, I don't know why I have like sleeve island issues. It's like body island that's like really much more time consuming. I don't know. It's just the second thing. I've never actually knit something twice.
It's like, oh, come on, not again. Are you kidding me?
I can knit sleeves twice, but it takes forever. But yes, so these cords are my favorite thing. Not only for sleeves, but also when you just want to like do a fit check on the body.
Transfer it.
You transfer, and they're so easy because you connect it to.
Is it the ones that are hollow and you slide it over the needle?
Yeah. So you just, I'm not going to do it because it's on a different thing, but so you just like connect it to the needle.
Love it.
And then, so if I were transferring these stitches back.
Well, it's so much easier to transfer them than transferring them off of the waist yarn.
Yeah,
oh
right.
My God,
And then you just feed the needle. So this is like probably the wrong size needle but so then you just, can you see that? Okay.
Yes.
Connect it to the cord, and then you're just feeding it through, and then voila, all your stitches are back.
It's awesome. Waist yarn's the worst. It's so smooth and nice.
Waist yarn's the worst.
Well, once you use something smooth and nice and easy like that, and it's just like, you're like, why have I been wrestling with this waist yarn problem? Oh my God.
That's exactly it.
So we have a comment in the questions. Is that your high point pullover, and that's in testing now?
It is.
Yes. How exciting.
Yes.
So I think there was one other guest we had that like that kind of sleeve that where you transfer. What is the name of it again?
Laura Nelkin.
Is it knitting barber cords? Is that right?
Yep.
Or at least that's how I know it. They might have several names. I don't know how many of them there are.
I think they're also like, you can get it at the hardware store, like in a spool, get as much as you want. I'm pretty sure. I think that's what Laura said. I think that's what Laura said.
Yeah, we'll have to find it and put it in the comments below.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I actually shared it, in like one of my newsletters recently because people do notice that like when I'm sharing my progress photos that they're in. And so I had noticed like 5 people in the past month had either sent me a message through Instagram or emailed me and said like, what are those like cool cords that you have? And I'm like,
Oh,
does,
you know
like,
who else?
does the whole world not know about this yet?
No, we don't. I'm still stuck on my
Shared it in
fish
my
markers and waste yarn.
You know who else said it? Victoria Marchand. She also.
Oh yeah, see all you awesome sweater designers, you got it done. Yeah, it's awesome. So where can people find you online, Tiff? They want to connect with you and your designs.
So on Instagram, I am Tif Neilan _ hand. No, what am I? Yes,
that's right. Hand
that's right.
Tif Neilan
right.
_ We're gonna put it into the comments below.
Yeah, I'm putting together a whole link pack here.
My Ravelry, I believe I changed to be Tif Neilan because I think it was Tif Hand Knits before, and I changed it.
Yep, it says Tif Neilan.
Right? Because I put that on my patterns, like my copyright is Tif Neilan, and I thought it was confusing. And then my website is tifhandknits.com. And that's how you can find me.
I'm not sure if my links worked. I tried to put them
your
all
links.
in one.
Oh, you forgot to put in. So there's missing some spaces there. That's why.
That's all right. Let's do it again. No problem.
So Tiff, we loved talking with you today. It's so exciting to hear your insight into your design and into everything that you are creating. Thank you for sharing your process and your thoughts with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We were psyched to have you. Absolutely awesome.
And we'll touch base with you online. Thanks for being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tiff. Awesome.
All right, here we are again. Everyone, that was fantastic. We just wanted to say that this program, every month we come on to interview someone, and it's made possible by our fantastic patrons. We have a community on Discord that is unbelievably helpful for both designers and tech editors, and we'd love if you'd like to join us. So you can go to this link on patreon.com. It's Tech Tip Talk. If you want to support us and support this show, we'd love to have you. What else? We have
and you can, and just, you know, a shameless ask, like you can share, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If you like any of our videos or anything, you can share.
And we have a book coming out specifically for aspiring knitwear designers and knit designers in November, right? Or is it October 31st now?
October 31st is the release date of the book. So it's for knitting designers. Pretty excited. And
that's down in the comments below. It is the Knitting Pattern Writing Handbook. It's a mouthful. And if you'd like to order it, pre-orders are open. You can order at the link below. We love your support. And we basically put together a whole book of everything that we get asked over and over and over again by knitwear designers to curate all the information into one book that you can put into your project bag and refer to over and over again. And like we mentioned during the broadcast, we did create size charts for men, women, and children that come in the book.
I mean, that's kind of like our thing. We would want this in a book, so we we're like, let's just do it.
Yes, and definitely in the comments, ask your local library to get the book. It will be available through Story Publishing on October 31st, and we'll be doing a book signing at Rhinebeck. We'd love to see you there. And every week, Christina writes a fantastic newsletter. So subscribe here and YouTube to get notified when we go live, and sign up for our newsletter to hear more about all of our deep thoughts on knitting pattern writing.
You are a tech editor? You need to head over to the Tech Editor Hub.
Yes. Thanks a lot for being here today. I'm remembering, Christina. Here goes the outro.
Roll the
Thank you,
outro.
guys.
Thanks, Tiff. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot for being here. Bye.